The Weather Station is the performing moniker of musician Tamara Lindemann, who calls Toronto, Ontario, home. In 2017, the labels Paradise of Bachelors and Outside Music jointly released her fourth album as The Weather Station, and the self-titled record went on to earn rave reviews around the world, including a Canadian Juno Award nomination for 2018 Contemporary Roots Album of the Year. I recently traveled to Tamara's home in Toronto, and we had an extensive discussion about the songs on her new album and what they might say about her and the world around her. Sponsored by Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, and Planet of Sound locations in Ottawa and Toronto, this is the 384th episode of Creative Control, featuring Tamara Lindemann of The Weather Station with your host, me, Vish Khanna.
Still living with the feeling pent up in my chest. My old lifelong companion, the one I know the best. Oh, I guess I got the hang of it. The impossible. You could say I moved right in with it. The impossible.
Tamara, thank you for being back on the show.
You're welcome.
How are you?
I'm good. I just got home from tour and I'm leaving tomorrow. So I'm a little bit frazzled, but I'm good.
Yeah, I appreciate you spending even a little bit of time with me in between all of this touring activity. How long was the tour you just got back from?
It was a month. So it was a long tour.
That's long.
For us. And we just returned the rental van covered in mud and salt. We drove it like 15,000 kilometers, I think.
15,000?
Well, we drove all like the big circle, like the US and Canada. So
okay.
It's a lot of driving.
Yeah. Are you getting used to that? Because I don't know I can't remember if we've ever talked about touring. Do you like touring?
I do like touring, and I think I'm fairly adaptable to touring. I don't mind like when it's like, okay, we got an 8-hour drive today. I'm like, oh, cool. And usually like 99% of the time, I'm totally fine with that.
What do you do? What is your go-to, I'm going to kill time on, I have an 8-hour flight or a drive. What do you got a book? You got a podcast? You got a comedy album? You got a recipe you're going to learn?
You know, like that's the weird thing about touring is you always think, oh, I'm going to read this book. I'm going to sew this thing. I'm going to do this thing that I've been meaning to do. And it's weird how much I just sit and stare out the window. But that's actually really nice. And the thing that I appreciated about it, you know, honestly, like most touring musicians, I spend way too much time on my phone. But, you know, I also spend a lot of time just kind of like daydreaming and just staring out the window, which is something I really like about driving. Or when I'm driving, so I'm staring.
Oh, do you do a share of the driving?
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah. I do a lot of driving, actually.
Okay.
I like driving. But I find it really peaceful, and especially when I'm driving because there's no distractions. Like I can't do anything else. Find it.
Some musicians bring a person who will drive.
Yeah.
So they can be like, yeah, you know, we're just going to wind down from the show. But I always liked driving.
Yeah, if I didn't ever drive, I'd go crazy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But driving, just like it's really peaceful, and I really find when I am driving or just sitting in the back seat, like that's when I think about things and like ideas come to mind, and you know, it's like a really good daydream time that is something that I find really missing from home life. You know, like I forget. Like most people forget to just like sit and stare and think. Yeah,
I was going to say I would think like based on my knowledge of your music and some of the observational aspects of it, I would think staring into space is like a process oriented thing for you. Like staring out the window and thinking about things. That's a luxury half the time.
It is, yeah, and it's something that's interesting about touring where I was just talking to someone today about like it's like touring's really hard for all these reasons, but it's also there are things about it that are really peaceful and nice, you know, and then when you get home you're like, oh, I have to do all these things, you know, everything you touch is something that you have like this responsibility to, whereas when you're on tour, you know, like it can get very lonely and kind of melancholy when you're just passing through all these spaces and you never stay anywhere and people are like, let's hang out, and you're like, I can't, we're leaving town, you know, you're just constantly, but there is something like a certain amount of lightness that comes with that.
I get so much more done if someone's like a festival or something has put me up in a hotel for a few days.
Totally.
I get a lot done. Like,
Yeah.
It's amazing how much I get done in that time. Like beyond the festival stuff, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get that book read and I'm going to finish that article or, whatever. I'm going to record whatever. Like I like it. So I feel
Totally.
like you're the same.
Yeah, I find it peaceful. And, I always mourn that I like, because I have lots of ideas, but I never have time to like write any songs on tour.
You don't still?
I try to, but especially not on this tour.
No,
'Cause
no.
We were following a bus, so we were just constantly driving.
Were you opening for someone?
We were opening for Bahamas on this
Oh,
tour.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want to congratulate you on this record that came out in 2017, right?
Thanks.
Is that when it came out?
Yes.
It was.
That's last year. Yes.
I think I have to lead us chronologically, given the days you are still in, the tour mindset you might
Yeah.
still be in. No, it's congratulations on it, and it was, as I recall, it made a number of best of lists, and the top of at least one that I can think of. How do you deal with that now? How are you processing that adulation and that praise? Because I don't know that you probably experienced that in little pockets in the past, but did this feel different?
It felt really different. And like, it's kind of a funny thing to say, but it just actually felt really good because I feel like it's just like, I felt like I earned it in a way with this record that, like, I remember when All of It Was Mine came out, like, I didn't necessarily think much of that record. Like, it was just like this little record with these like little songs I thought were like only okay. And like, Dan Romano was like, they're really good. And I was like, okay, I believe you. But it wasn't like, and I made that record with him and it was like his ideas and
As a
they were
producer.
good ideas.
Yeah.
And when that record came out, it's not like it got all this adulation, but a lot of people really liked it and it like hit this chord, like in our small Canadian world that I had never, experienced that. And so when that happened, I was like really confused because I was like, wait, this is good. Like, wait a second. Like, and I was like going back to it and being like, okay, how is this good? How can I do this again? I had all those thoughts.
Well, you got into music, I think, as an experiment of some kind.
Kind of,
like,
yeah.
You didn't really, that wasn't necessarily your background. We established this the last time you were on the show that you have this theatrical background, acting and whatnot. But music fascinated you, right?
Well, it was a pretty deep feeling. And I always like wrote music weirdly. Like I wrote music when I was a kid. I don't have any of it. I don't remember it. I just but I would like write music on piano or like I tried to write songs. And I remember singing like an original song at like a talent show, but like I wish there's no like record of it. I don't know what it was.
You don't remember it?
I don't remember it.
Oh.
I remember,
How old would you have been?
like 13 or something.
That's amazing.
But
Because that's not only the songwriting chops or whatever they might have been at the time, but the gumption, the actual
gumption. Yeah.
nerve to
That's
get
true.
up and do that is a remarkable thing to have at that age.
Yeah, I think it was because I wasn't a teenager yet. Once I became a teenager, that was gone.
The self-consciousness crept in.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
But yeah, like with All of It Was Mine, I didn't know how to respond to people I really respected thinking it was good. I was like, okay, I guess this is good, so I have to figure out like what's good about it. And it actually made me like quite self-conscious after that.
What was that 2012?
11.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2011, yeah.
So then, I feel like a couple years after that, it was this slow process of trying to like learn how to write songs because
Sure.
I had written these songs that people thought were really good, but I was like, I don't know how I did it. I did it in like 10 minutes, like it was that kind of thing.
Sure.
So then I had to go through this long, slow process of like learning how to write songs. Now that it was now that it had been like uncovered, I was
Right.
like, it wasn't so easy. And I had all this like internal like,
Because of the expectation?
like just
Yeah.
like being like, okay, this is a good song, and that means maybe this is a bad song because it's not like this song. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
So there was that, and then I feel like with this record, I really came into this different space where I was like, okay, I'm gonna start like breaking a whole bunch of rules that I built up for myself, and rules that I think other people have, which they may or may not have.
Can you give me an example of one or two of those rules? I'm just curious.
Well, like the new way of like singing and just like a certain amount of like non sequiturs in the lyrics. Like,
Okay.
stuff like that. And just sort of like everything about this record was like me being very specific and peculiar in like how I went about it and like really listening to every dumb idea I had.
Pushing yourself, but
Yeah.
also embracing whatever happens, kind of thing.
I just mean like, yeah, like it was a very clear vision, and I was way more honest to that vision than I was like worrying about like, will this be good or accepted? You know what I mean? So it was this really interesting thing where I was like, I had this very conscious feeling where I was like, I'm going to put all this stuff out there that I'm afraid of and that I feel like I don't know whether people will accept it and all this stuff. And then to have people accept it and be like, this is really good is really cool.
I see. Okay.
And also too, because like I did go through all these funny things with this record where like my label like didn't like it like at any. I mean, they say now that they liked it, but they like wrote all these like long emails of like criticism about everything, you know, like the mixes and the songs and like the arrangements and there was also too like this trepidation of like me not hiring like a producer.
Because Afi from Bahamas, Afi Irvinen produced Loyalty, right?
Loyalty, yeah. And he was really wanted to produce this record and like came to the first session, and then he was like, you know what, like you kind of have a vision, like you should produce it, like I shouldn't be here. Oh. And I was like, you're so right. And I was really grateful to him for doing that.
Oh, nice.
You know, it was a really interesting thing to do, and he was so right. So it was just sort of this funny thing where like my label was like, wait, there's no producer, like who's gonna, you know, like not in a bad way, but just like there was trepidation, and then there was just sort of like everything kind of was a struggle of like, you know, the order and like the person who mastered the record and mixed, you know, like everything at every turn there were just like so many trials and tribulations, you know, which I think is always the case, but just having like really fought my way through all those things, I just feel so like validated and vindicated, where
I can
like,
see that.
It's not just that I thought it was a good record, you know, it was that like it's kind of cool to have taken all these risks and had like some people be like, this is a bad idea, and then be like, no, it was a good idea all along. And also too, I think it's just like in a you know, like music journalism is somewhat dead, you know, like there's a lot of really bad music journalism out there, and so you never really expect someone to really look beyond like, it sounds like Joni Mitchell, you know, like, so when people do, you know, I'm always just super grateful because I know like nobody's getting paid a lot to listen to records and think about them. So I really appreciate when I read things and I'm like, okay, this person like checked this out and thought about it. So that's awesome.
I was listening to Loyalty today just to remind, I loved Loyalty, and I was trying to remind myself of the connection to this record. And, you know, on the one hand, I can see what you're saying, and what a lot of the press said is like, wow,
it's really different. Yeah.
It's quite different. She's finally fulfilled the vision, like all that kind of stuff. But then I thought, I see a real continuity between the two records. Like I can see how in your process you refine certain things, and there's a bit more ambition, I guess, which is natural for an artist to like, totally. I'm just going to go for it in the next record. But I wanted to ask you about that. Like, do you see this as a continuum in any way? Like, do those two records, does this record and the last one do they seem connected to you?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I can see that it's like the you know, Loyalty was like starting to go towards some of the directions that this record like more fulfills. You know what I mean? And that like melodically, there's a lot of like I remember like I played a bunch of these songs like at a little show just to like try them out, and like Steve Lamke was like, oh, it's like you took Shy Women and then just like did that more but like kind of on steroids. And I'm like, yeah, you're kind of right. Like I kind of did take this like, yeah, and I think like songs like Wait As Wait Could Be, you know, I sort of like was like, oh, it's cool when there's
Loyalty has this foundational aspect for you.
Yeah, totally.
I think maybe more than previous records.
I don't know. I mean, everything's
it's hard to
so
be objective.
Different. Yeah. But I think too, it's like, yeah, Loyalty was like hinting at some things that I just then went further in. But the difference for me is that like when I went to go make Loyalty, like it was totally like I just had some songs and went to a studio and I had no idea what it was going to sound like, what was going to happen. Oh. And that was like a really beautiful experience. Like it was really like one of the nicest experiences of my life was like making Loyalty. Like we just walked in, it was just like me and Afi, and we're just like, all right. Like, I think we had one practice before where we were like, maybe this song will have drums on it, but there was no plan. And everything just sort of like felt like it like dropped out of the sky and was very new and fresh. And this record is like, I really had a plan. I was like, all right, there's gonna be strings on these songs. They're gonna be like this. The drums are gonna be like this. The bass is gonna be like this. And that was really cool too, you know. And that had never happened to me that clearly, where I just like knew exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but that's why I feel so empowered by the experience, because I'm like, okay, I had a plan, I enacted it, and it was good. That's a good sign.
It's very good. Is there a meaning behind the fact that it's a self-titled record? Is that an establishment move, or just, I mean, not an establishment, like you're joining the higher ranks of the establishment? No, I mean, were you like, is there a purpose to that? To like, this is the weather station? Have we read too much into that as dead music journalists?
No. I think I just, in part, I just couldn't think of a title.
Oh.
But it was also like pretty quickly, I was just like, this one's a self-titled, you know, like I could think of a bunch of records or a few records that like were the self-titled record that weren't the first record.
Yeah.
And I was like, I kind of like that move. And or even the self-titled record that's the first record. And it has like a clarity and like a simplicity to it that like a title doesn't have.
Sure. But does it, I guess, just following on what you said, do you see this as the beginning of something new?
Maybe in some ways.
Okay.
Yeah,
No, totally. I'm just I'm hopping around because I see continuity between Loyalty and this record, the self-titled one. But I think for you, this was really, this is maybe the foundational record.
Yeah.
This really has spurred something within you.
Totally.
Yeah?
I would say I feel that way. Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk about these songs, and we're going to try and do all of them. That's the plan.
Okay.
Uh-oh.
No, I'm joking.
That is a weird reaction to this exercise. No, I want to begin with the first song. It's called Free.
Yeah.
You were always so adamant. You told me that the one thing I was missing, I didn't know I was free. Tonight, when I pulled the car around, I was alone under the sky, and I was thinking it was the first year when I could see somehow you were right.
We were just kind of talking, I think, loosely about liberation, freedom, this feeling of like you had this vision and you were trusting yourself to just try things.
Mm-hmm.
Does the song speak to that on some level?
Yeah, totally. So it's sort of like, I mean, there's only like 5 lines in the song, which was really challenging.
Challenging?
Yeah, because it's really hard to put like everything you want to say into like just a couple lines.
Was that economy a purposeful thing? Like, were you like, I'm going to try and say a lot in just a few...
I think it was just the way the melody was.
Oh.
I was like, this is the way it is, because I really like those like really long notes.
Right.
Like, I don't know how I came up with that song, but yeah, there were these like really long notes that are all the same like vowel, or not all, but most of them, and just sort of like, yeah. So it's just sort of like this story. It's like, you know, it's you know, thinking of like a person or many people who are like, you know, you can do anything you want, like, world's your oyster, like you're free, you know, but also sort of like with this thing of like, you know what your problem is like you don't realize that you know what I mean. And it was interesting because I was like,
oh, like you can do anything you want, but here's a lot of advice.
Yeah, well, sort of like, you know what I mean?
Here's how you're going to get
sort
to
of
do whatever
like,
you want.
You know, and I was like, I've never really felt that way. You know, I've always felt like pretty hemmed in by tons of ideas and expectations, and also like in music specifically, like really hemmed in by like, oh, like, is so-and-so going to think this is good? Like, is this good by these standards? You know what I mean? Like all these sort of things. And
Specific people, you mean?
Oh yeah, totally. Like there's
I-
lots of people like I respect and like and
Yeah, and I
trust
can hear.
the
I mean,
opinion of.
I wondered if there was a specific muse in this particular song because you seem to be singing to someone.
Well, that's the thing. It's like the person's like, you can do anything you want, and I'm thinking about this person who I respect and like wish that I was like. You know what I
I
mean?
see. Okay.
And it's like there's lots of people I know who are very free and as artists and as people and just like do whatever the hell they want. And I was like, I don't think I can do that. That isn't me. But at the same time, it's sort of like this understanding of like, you know, I've started to feel that way in the last year or two, you know, that I actually can do anything I want. And then it's sort of like, well, if I did anything I want, what would that even look like? You know, and that's sort of why it's sort of like, in the end, you know, it's like I'm driving away,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
and it's like, I'm sort of pointing out to the other person that it's like, sort of, I was trying to express something very vaguely, like, it's like, I've emancipated myself from like their idea of freedom and I'm, you know, and maybe they'll follow me and like what my idea
Right, yeah.
could be, or what would be my direction. Like if I was leading the way, where would I go, you know? And that's sort of like, you know, like it never occurred to you to follow me is like kind of like a lot of my songs are like, kind of seem like they're about one person, but they're just like a thing I've felt in so many different relations.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can see that. Yeah.
It's sort of like a very mangled way of trying to explain that many things. So I just thought it was like the opening to the record, because in the way it's like also like the mission statement of the record.
So if the you is maybe like an omni you, not just a single you, is the I, when you employ the I, is that necessarily your perspective?
Oh yeah, I think it is.
That's
Yeah,
always you.
probably.
Sorry, I. That's all.
That's always me.
The I is always you,
Yeah.
and the you is some kind of
Sometimes-
amalgam.
Sometimes one person. And
Sometimes
sometimes
one
a few
person.
people, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you finish this piece, and do you feel, because it's based on at least one real person, I think, does that alter your relationship with that person? Just the fact that you've conveyed this out loud and like, you know, because your innermost thoughts when you articulate them, whether it's journal keeping, songwriting, whatever it is, when you, or in a conversation with someone, that is altering. That changes your perspective, whether the other person knows it or not. And I'm just curious.
That's interesting. That's a good question.
Because you're having a conversation with them, but it's with yourself.
Totally.
It's with yourself to them about them, but it's really they don't know.
Totally.
So I just wonder if that's altered your perspective on your muse in this case.
I think a little bit, yeah. Because I was like, oh, right. Like, I respect this person and I, like, look up to them. But now I'm, like, breaking free from that thing, you know, and going my own way and, like, curious if they're going to, like, look up to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
The way you looked up to them.
yeah. And I think in some cases that totally happened.
But is it a quiet dynamic? Is it a quiet power dynamic, or is it a palpable power dynamic shift? I'm getting way too into this, by the way.
This is intense. I don't know. I think it's a quiet power dynamic shift.
Okay.
But I think I really have experienced that actually. This is an interesting question because I feel like I've experienced that lately in the last like 2 years or so. There've been all sorts of people in my life who I looked up to and considered like mentors or like people that I was looking up to.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can think of all those people who I look up to and feel ways in which we're now like on an equal footing, you know, or we're friends.
Right.
It's like they're like pals and people where, you know, they do something I think is really cool and I do something and they think it's cool. And, you know, we're all on this like more equal footing and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there anything you want to say about it musically? It starts with a bit more distortion than maybe we're used to from the weather station.
Yeah, this song is the boulevard of forgotten guitar solos. Everyone I know tried to play a guitar solo on this and none of them worked. Daniel Romano played a really wicked guitar solo actually, but it was like a last minute thing. He just gotten home and I was like, can you play a guitar solo on this? Like I've been stumped by this song. And he sent it and it was like really good. It really pushed the song in a different direction, but it was really good. But then it was just like sonically, like there was this like thing that like we couldn't get rid of. And it was like literally like the last minute, like it was like the record's mixed and like we're about to master it and I'm still like fiddling with this guitar solo. So in the end, there kind of isn't one.
You have this. There's a tendency on the record for the distortion and the. I think it's primarily guitars. They come up, they explode a little bit, and then they kind of just
Disappear.
They do. Yeah, they kind of. There's embers of them, and this song has that going on. I think where you're like, oh, what's going on, and then it just sort
And then it's
of
over.
it sort of melts. It sort of floats away.
I don't know whether that's because I don't know how to finish. I don't know how to like resolve songs, or I choose not to.
I've decided I'm a bad ender. I am not. If I know I'm like down to the last couple of things I have to do, they're never done as well as the first few things I do.
Totally. Well, I think this song, like the thing that I like about it is that chord, like the bum bum bum. It's so weird.
Yeah.
And when I was writing this song, I was like messing around on a guitar. The other thing that's cool about this song is like, so for this record, I came up with a new tuning, and then I made the whole record except for one song in that tuning. So I came up with this tuning, and I just like went to go to a chord that would normally be D, but because I changed the tuning, it was this chord, and I was like, whoa, there's something so like just like caught me about this chord,
Right.
and I became obsessed with this chord,
Right.
and then I like somebody told me, they're like, oh, it's a tritone. I'm like, what's a tritone? And they're like, oh, it's this specific chord of like stacked thirds that's like, if you look it up on the internet, it was like banned. Like there were like swaths of history where like they thought that if like composers used this chord, like it would cause people to go crazy. Like they called it like the devil's chord.
Oh wow.
It's really interesting.
And then you were drawn to it,
And I was drawn to it.
even subconsciously. You didn't know this backstory.
No.
You were drawn to the devil's chord.
I was.
That's
yeah,
evil.
I was interested in the devil. So, yeah. So in the end, it's like it just goes to that chord and it like resolves and unresolves it because it's like going back and forth in that chord.
It's a magical song and an arresting opening. I appreciate the insight on it.
Cool.
We're gonna move on.
Okay.
The next song on the record is 30.
30.
There was a time you put your hand on the small of my back. I was surprised that you touched me like that. But there in your hand was a current of life I could hardly stand or stay still. And I didn't imagine it. If I did, I'd have made some joke of it. It was strange how I could feel so sane, so plain when you're around.
I still remember seeing you play 30 with my son, who was maybe 4 or 5 at the time.
Oh, at the Cornerstone.
Yes, that's right. It was
And
a
he
kazoo.
he was stoked on that song.
He loved 30. He
Yeah.
always thinks you're 30 years old. I'm like, I don't think she's 30 anymore. I mean, I
No.
have no idea.
I had to change ages.
But he often brings that song up. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but this song has really captivated people. Like among people who have been into this record, this song seems like a real statement song. Does it feel that way to you?
Totally. Yeah, it's the standout. It's the one that always goes the best. Like I love it because, you know, like doing weird stuff like opening for Bahamas, like it's not our crowd. Like people don't really fully get us all the time.
Yeah.
And like funny things have happened. Like, you know, we played in like Fredericton at like the, you know, big fancy union venue, and like,
Yeah.
and like the usher came in and she was like, I didn't catch the performance, but that last song, what song is that? How can I buy the CD? You know, like it's just like it does, like it just it struck a chord, and that's always a good feeling.
It's a magical song because it has such a continuous energy. It just constantly seems to be building.
Right, and that's what's cool about it. I love when that happens, where you can do something that's not like a conventional pop song. Like there's no chorus. The melody just kind of like goes and goes and goes. And it's sort of like, it's not really even in like you know, like it's kind of all the same chord. Like the chords change, but like they're kind of all the same thing.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of notes you could play over the whole song and just go like, "Meh," and it would be fine. But yeah, I just, I was really stoked that people liked it so much. And I don't know, sometimes that happens.
It does.
I wish I knew how to make it happen all the time, but yeah.
Is this one of the risk-taking songs that you were kind of alluding to?
Well, like for me, it seemed like a weird, like totally different song, you know? Like I'd never had a song where I sang like that.
On some level,
And
it's
all
a
those
little
words,
structureless. Like
It's totally structureless.
yeah.
It's just like, you know, like all this like fast singing.
You
I mean,
curse. There's a curse word.
I curse in it. oh my goodness, it's just out of control. There's a guitar solo in it. It's just like for the weather station before this, it's pretty different.
Yeah.
And but it felt very true to what in my mind, the weather station's always kind of been somehow deep down. You know what I mean? Like the spirit's in it, but it's like this is a totally new thing.
It really feels to like it's a pointed way of capturing a moment in time. I mean, obviously it's called 30, and by the end of the song, we learn that you were 30, and maybe one of the other protagonists is 31.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this sort of like, this is the age we're at. It's almost like a photograph. It feels
Totally.
like it feels like a home movie or something. It's just like, this is what we were doing. Here's almost everything we were doing at this point in time.
Totally.
And was it important for you to capture something about whoever you were capturing and yourself at this point in your lives, or at that point in your lives, I should say? As you mentioned, you had to change ages.
Totally. I did have to switch ages since then. But yeah, I think it was in a way, that's kind of the only way I really know how to write songs, is to like build a photograph style thing.
Yeah.
I think that's like my most natural tendency. I don't do that on every song. Sometimes I'm really trying to say a statement. But in this case, I just sort of went to like straight up Tamara writing style, which is to just like give a whole bunch of information. And then there is actually a lot of meaning in that. When you describe something or someone or a moment, a lot of like emotion comes through, which is kind of cool. So
Yeah.
I thought these emotions were interesting to express, and there were a bunch of things that I put in that song that I like snuck in to all those words, that I was like, ooh, I can't believe I'm saying this, but nobody so far has like tapped me on the shoulder and,
You mean no one close to you has been like, hey, why are you saying this? Or just anyone?
Oh, I just mean like, I just like talk about like feeling really dark and stuff.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
And like,
No one's expressed concern for you?
no, people have, but I just mean like, I was like, oh, I haven't said this in a song before. I
Right.
haven't said
Oh, I
it
see.
really in life before. So it was like kind of cool to just throw it in and bust it out at the Cornerstone, and your son loved it,
He did. It sticks with him still, yeah.
That's awesome.
Absolutely. We move on to the next song. It's called You and I on the Other Side of the World.
Oh, it was always a marriage from the moment that you stepped in to my hallway. Shy as anyone I'd ever known. You choose what to believe in this flippant time. There's no real reason not to. We wrote letters to each other as though we're dressing the ocean that we stand before. You in my coat again, and I in your blue jeans, and the light turned golden on the distant headlands and the ocean. You and I on the other side of the world. Love, it is no mystery, never has been, no, not to me. I love because I see.
I've heard of love at first sight.
Mm-hmm.
I've not heard of marriage at first sight, which I think sort of occurs in the song. Is that right?
Yeah, it's sort of like,
What's the line exactly?
it was always a marriage.
From the moment you were in my hallway kind of
Stepped
thing?
into my
Stepped
hallway,
up in my
yeah.
hallway. Sorry to mangle the beautiful words, but I was struck by that.
Yeah, well, it's a very genuine song about like my relationship. And I totally felt that way. It's not like I was like, okay, we're going to get married. It's like, it already is. It's just sort of like this interesting thing where like when my partner appeared in my life, I was like, oh, we're connected in this way that like I'm like taking this person on. In the same way that a marriage is. It's like you take on the other person and expect that suddenly you're going to be there when things are going down, and like that to me is like a marriage. It's like, it's a different thing than a love affair.
Right.
It's obviously built from the same foundation, but it's a sort of like this idea of like I'm taking on this person, and I did that kind of right away. You know, like
It's a deeper bond.
it's a deeper bond. It's like, you know, when we met, it was like kind of very immediate that I felt like I just like took everything that this person kind of came with and just put it in my room, and it's like, all right,
It's part of
here
me
you
now.
are now.
Yeah, and it's part of me.
And that feeling was strong, and I liked that line when I came up with it. I was like, that's how I've always felt. And then a lot of the song like really kind of talks about that whole idea of commitment, you know, like more intimate than I could imagine, but with space I can't fathom, you know, like it's sort of like this thing of like when you're with someone, it's so intimate, and then there's just all these massive distances, and you're like, how can this exist within the same thing? But that's intimacy, I would say.
Yeah.
And I was trying to like, originally this song was called Hand. I don't know why I changed the title, but it's like, you know, sort of like this idea of like asking for someone's hand in marriage, and like, why is the phrase asking for their hand in marriage? You know, it's sort of like
Maybe the ring.
To me, I know, yeah, whatever. The idea of like asking for someone's hand, and, you know, like where I say like I asked for your hand in some infinite understanding. You
There's
know,
something
like,
to do with hands. Generally, we shake hands. I think just touching people with your
Yeah,
hands is a sacred.
it's a sacred thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I was like, you know, I was asking for your hand in some infinite understanding. And I say, but I don't know what I'm asking, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know what this will mean.
Right.
You know, like it's a pretty intense thing to be like, yeah, we're going to be together forever. Who knows what that means? Like, we might not like each other 5 years from now, or like that
true.
might mean, you know, like I could, you know, have my legs amputated for some reason, and you might wind up having to wheel me around, you know, like it's a crazy thing.
It is a crazy thing to contemplate. The vows are for better or for worse, you know, and all
Yeah.
that stuff. And I think you're really taking that to heart.
Well, like we're not married, but you know, it is that thing, and it's just an interesting thing to contemplate, like what these things mean, and sort of, I guess for me, the thing that always drives me to write a song is to always contemplate like the cracks in, you know, in a common idea. It's like lots of people have written songs about like marriage or like eternal love, you know.
Well, the fact that you titled the song rather, "You and I on the Other Side of the World," suggests that even though we are, you know, away from our home, we are at home together. Is that what you're going for there?
Yeah, I think I
Is
just
that too Hallmark?
no, that's a nice idea. Yeah, because I wrote the song thinking about like we were in Australia
Touring,
we were, like,
probably, or something.
touring,
Yeah.
and we were on this beach, and like I just couldn't believe that me and this person had like come all this way together, and we're like now just like standing on a beach in January in the sun, like, and it's boiling hot, and like we
Right.
have freckles on our face. Like, how did we get here? This is so crazy. So yeah, it was just like a romantic.
That's love, though. I mean, the
Yeah.
notion that you and I can be wherever we are. It's you and I are a unit, no matter where we are. I took
Yeah.
that from that.
I hadn't thought of that reading either, because yeah, it's like why do I talk about like how we're wearing each other's clothes? Like
Yeah,
I don't know why I bring that up, other than maybe that was the idea. you
yeah.
know?
There's comfort there, even though you're not at home.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we move on to the next song. It's called "Kept It All to Myself."
Kept it all to myself. Kept it all to myself. Kept it all to myself. There were days when the luminescence of the skies and the deep brown grasses struck me so hard. And you relieved me, can hardly take it. Like feeling I rode up past St. Clair. Same old city, but it could have been anywhere. In the center of the air, so exotic. Every thought like I never have thought it. And I felt that confidence in me, like a child in a strange new body. I kept it all to myself. I kept it all to myself. I kept it all to myself.
I have a hard time believing that you would keep anything to yourself.
What?
Is that insulting? No,
Kind of.
I didn't mean to insult you. I feel like every time you're on the show, I borderline insult you, and I don't mean to. It's our rapport, I like to say. No, but why? Where did this song come from for you?
It's just like a pretty straight like description of like a time period, like maybe 3 years ago. where I actually did keep everything to myself, and it's just like a description of like several things I felt and experienced that I kept to myself.
Okay.
You know, and like I think yeah, you're right that I can be very like voluble. That's a word, right?
It is a word. No, I was not suggesting that. I just know that in our conversations, like
I'm very forthright.
No,
yeah.
you are, but I also ask questions and you answer them, which is a great.
Not everyone does that.
A great gift for an interviewer is to have someone who is willing to talk about things. So no, I didn't mean it in any untoward way. God damn it.
No, I think, well, but it is funny because it's like in music and in like interviews I'm one way and in life I'm kind of another.
But you also
And
you write about talking.
I do, yeah, I do.
You tend to write about how some people talk too much and some people don't, and your sister and whoever else.
Totally.
You know, you
There's
think
a lot of talking, yeah.
Well, but you think not only is there talking, you think about talking.
I think about talking.
So that it's obviously something you're concerned about potentially.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. Like communication is big, I think, for me. And this song, yeah, it's sort of just. I mean, I'm chastising myself for keeping everything to myself in this song.
Yes.
Like I'm pointing out that, you know, it's pretty silly. But yeah, it's about like this time where like I went through this really dark time, and I just like when I look back, I'm like, it's insane that I kind of didn't tell anyone. Like I just like kept up this crazy front through this whole time.
Oh.
And it's so weird because it's like I know tons of people who've been through like super heavy stuff and like probably would have loved to have talked to me about it.
Yeah.
And you just lose so much when you don't say, hey, you know, if someone says, how are you? And you're like, you know, honestly, I'm feeling this way, you know, like, but I was reflecting on that. And also just like sort of this funny thing of like, you know, I kept that to myself, but I also like keep it to myself when I have these like beautiful, like, you know, if I'm in the van and I see this like amazing thing go by and I think of all these like metaphors or something, I don't like say like, hey guys, like I was just thinking about how like
Sure. I see. Sure. That's fair.
about how like these mountains are really, you know, and like nobody really does.
You don't want to be a pretentious person. No, absolutely. Yeah. You keep certain things to yourself.
But yeah, it's just interesting. And then I was kind of thinking about that idea of like, what's all this stuff that like we're all just like carrying around with us that like, it's this funny thing where I think everyone thinks people know more about them than they do. You know, like I think everyone thinks like all this stuff is somewhere, but then you're like, wow, there's so much stuff that's just like sloshing around in me and in anyone that like, you know, it's like just hanging out in your brain, and
depending on what
you've never brought it up to anyone.
Yeah, and depending on what it is, you either think you can resolve it yourself.
Totally.
You don't need someone else's help.
Totally.
And then at some point you might discover that talking to someone about it should have happened a long time ago.
Totally.
Because you're like, oh, I didn't have a perspective on this thing.
Totally.
And now I do, and that could have 6 months ago I wish I'd known this. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
But at the same time, we're in an age of everybody expressing themselves all the time. So I think you reserving it is not. I think that's commendable.
Well, there's two sides to it, I guess, in the song and in life, where it's just like, you know, with the really beautiful experiences, sometimes if you express it, you lessen it, you know? Like if you say something, you're sort of lessening this thing that's really perfect in your head. You know, and with the darker experiences, it's like sometimes by saying it, you lessen it enough to be able to get a handle on it, you know, which is kind of the point.
That's true.
So, yeah, it's interesting.
Now, I've been meaning to ask you about this as we've gone along, and they will recur as people listen to the whole record when they do that. But strings, there's some string stuff going on, and like this song we've been talking about, Kept It All to Myself, as though it's some brooding number, but it's actually kind of a pop song on some level, I would say. Yeah, and the strings really accentuate that.
Totally, yeah. When I wrote the song, I was like, oh, this is so fun. I want to have a pop song about like silence, because pop songs are always about like dancing and like expression. You know what I mean? Not always, but like often. Sure. You know, it's like pop songs are about like expression. And I was like, oh, it'd be so interesting to have a pop song that's about like not expressing something. But yeah, I really failed in some ways to write a pop song. Like it doesn't fully work in the way that like if I knew what I was doing, it would have worked. Like it's kind of like a mangled pop song. That's how I see it.
Well, if we go back
But
to...
mangled in a good way. I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
I mean, we were talking about 30 not having conventional structures,
Mm-hmm.
and in some ways, Kept It All to Myself has this... There's a hook to it.
Totally.
There's a chorus to it, and it kind of... It reels you in. And then the strings coming in and out the way they do throughout the record. But on this song, I'm just struck by some of the string section stuff that you've done. And I just was curious if... And again, if I think back on Loyalty had strings.
It did, yeah.
Does this feel like an elevation of your exploration of strings?
Totally, yeah. So Loyalty had strings, but it was just sort of like, I just like had a pal who came over and we just like recorded like, I was like, what if you kind of play like this kind of thing? And then he kind of played, like it was just sort of like we figured it out and it was just like one guy.
Uh-huh.
So it wasn't like written, whereas this was like, I got like a MIDI keyboard and I like wrote all the parts and then like they got turned into music. And then they were played, by a string player. So everything was like very arranged, which was super fun and like kind of one of the most fun musical experiences I've ever had. Because it was so cool to be like, because I'm not a real, like I don't read music really. So whenever I want something to happen a certain way, I'm always like fumbling. Like I'm like, like when like so-and-so does this and like it kind of sounds like this, and like if you just like on guitar were and like it's just a nightmare. So being able to be like, all right, the viola does this exactly, and this harmony is formed by these strings. So I did that, and on this song, it was just pretty fun. I was just sitting at home for a while with headphones and a MIDI keyboard, just like making these parts, and then they got played by real people. So it was just sort of like this funny thing of like, it's this weird pop song with like only two parts that just like alternate unexpectedly, basically.
Right.
It's the structure of the song. And then the verse melody goes over the chorus chords at the end.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Okay.
That's basically the structure of it. So it's just sort of a matter of like highlighting these different emotions and things with these different aspects of the arrangement. A few like repeating things, but then I really enjoyed like kind of the strings go like da 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 da, like there's sort of like these swells, but every time the swells happen they're like a different iteration of the chord, which I kind of like because
it's cool.
I feel like a normal person wouldn't do that.
You don't think of yourself as a very normal person, do you?
No, apparently not.
You think you're some sort of freak. I don't think you're a freak.
I feel like a freak. So it was really fun to do that.
But the MIDI keyboard thing also speaks to, I think this is another example of what we were talking about earlier. Like this is you taking real ownership over your craft a little bit and being like, you know what? I don't know how to do certain things. I'm just going to make myself learn how to do them.
Totally.
I can't read music, but I can still contribute and teach people. Just because they have a violin doesn't make them all fancy. They're not better than me. No one's better than me. That's you. I like that.
Well, totally. And it's part of why, like I say, I have this ownership over this record because, like, whereas other records, it's like you bring someone in and they play what they think is cool and then you're like, cool, that's great. This was like, especially in the case of the strings, it was like, play this. Exactly. Because that's the way strings work. But it was really fun.
It's a great song.
Thanks.
That's a great one. Okay, we move on to the next song. It's called Impossible.
I found that I was angry in the cool of the day. All the tall trees swaying, all I did not say. Though I managed all the details, I made all those phone calls, and I wrote up all the emails and straightened out the front hall. It don't matter, it made no difference. All through our disagreement, there was a cardinal on the fence. Put no walls around me, I will lay the stones myself, and I'll lay down with my body and give nothing else. Still living with the feeling pent up in my chest. My old lifelong companion, the one I know the best. Oh, I guess I got the hang of it. The impossible. You could say I moved right in with it. The impossible. I think a lot about living in the time that we're living now
in all the ways in which things like aren't okay, basically. And I was thinking about like certain personal situations that I've been in or other people in my life are in or were in. And it's sort of this thing where, you know, you look back and you're like, how was that okay? Like, how was that person okay through that time? You know what I mean? Or through that marriage or whatever it is. And you're like, it's so interesting how people, you know, as people just figure out how to get the hang of it. You know what I mean? Like, that's why that line is like, I guess I got the hang of it, the impossible. And that was really basically the point of the song. Is like, how do you get the hang of things that are like impossible, you know, or and that could be a good thing or a bad thing, I guess. And
you're a young person, and on some level, the notion of human perseverance against all odds is sort of it almost feels like a foreign concept to you at this age. Maybe is that fair?
No, I just mean like it's interesting how it's like you can look at something and be like, I don't want to be in this situation, or I don't like the way this is, but then you just get used to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Any situation.
Right. Or just like things might not be how you expected or what you wanted, but you get used to it. And, you know, maybe sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that's a bad thing. And, you know, and in a broader sense of the world, it's like funny how you can like be like, well, you know, it's like Trump became president and we all lost our minds and now we're all used to it. You know, it's like sort of funny where, you know, and then like the impossible, like the idea of like the impossible, like what are impossible things, you know? And it's like,
my mind went to grieving and grief and
interesting.
And like, you know, I'm a dad, so every once in a while you read a story about someone losing their kids or something, and you're just like, yeah. I couldn't do that. Like I couldn't do it.
Totally.
That seems impossible.
Totally.
And so when you say that, that's where my mind goes, which is dark in itself, but that's what I think of.
Yeah.
But what carries us all through, and this is why I went to sort of human perseverance, is I think you hear these stories about people overcoming what something that seems impossible to deal with. And so I didn't mean to be like, you haven't experienced nothing. You're just a kid. I just meant the gradations of what is impossible and what people are able to overcome and function. I mean, it is remarkable. It's an interesting observation to make.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I was trying to like fumble at, I guess.
Yeah, no,
like
it's not a fumble.
Yeah, well, the verses aren't very good, but
you want to Life of Pablo this and edit the song maybe some more?
I actually pulled up the like lyric folder recently. I was like, okay, I know I wrote better lyrics to this song.
Oh, really?
At some point, and I'm gonna just start singing them, but I couldn't find them. But I'll figure it out later.
Oh, you're still trying to figure it out as a live song. That's very That's very refreshing to hear someone admit on some level, because I do hear about it from time to time where someone's, you know, a song changes, and if you're a nerd about a band, you will notice when
you're
artist,
like, what the hell, they changed the words.
He totally changed the words, and like, why did he do that, or why did she do that, like what's going on, you know, what happened, and is it better, is it not, like totally. And particularly for people who get married to a record as the frozen archive has to be the legitimate version, you know?
Totally.
Anyway, I like it. I like your free-spirited ways.
Well, hopefully. Hopefully.
It's good. Okay, do you want to move on?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, well, you feel like we've given that song its due?
We've given it some love.
Power. Speaking of Kanye West, I mentioned him earlier. We want to move on to a song called Power.
My rap song.
You're a friend to me. You told me all that was on your mind, and it meant so much to me from the beginning. Oh, it was so kindred spirited to mine. I think of you sometimes in the early morning as I dress to meet a plane before the cab came. I let you down when I had the most to give. I let you down, but you were quick to forgive. You wanted to help me. You wanted to sit and talk for hours, but I wanted power.
I mean, it's another like half and halfer, you know? It's like, I was thinking about how, you know, how interesting it is. It's not something you really like talk about to your pals or whatever. But I'm like, oh, I've totally pursued power in my life. I don't mean like megalomaniac power. Like, I don't mean like political, you know, I just mean like power as in the thing that means that people like listen to you when you talk. You know what I mean? Like, I guess I could have said respect, but power, there's something really interesting about, like, I just was kind of fascinated. I was thinking about the way that power works just on like interpersonal, like normal people level, you know, like
Sure.
power, like what makes people respect you and like be curious about you and like ask you questions and stuff, you know, like, and I don't mean like, this is one of the many things where I was like, I can't believe I'm putting this on a record and nobody's freaked out, you know, like, not in a bad way, but just sort of like, you know, I think it's something that people are thinking about a lot now. I feel like when I wrote the song like 2 or 3 years ago, like it was just sort of like starting to come into my consciousness, but just, you know, people are talking a lot now about like privilege and power, like in society, like in terms of like women and people of color and like how people have power and don't realize it and don't realize the ways that they're like disempowering other people just because of their own like biases. And like I was writing this song kind of being like all fragmented in the way that I was thinking and just like not really know what I was trying to say. And having finished it, I'm like, oh, I think what I was trying to say was like all the times in which I had been misunderstood because I didn't have power. You know what I mean? Like, where it's like somebody was looking at me and they were like, you're like this. And I could be talking and saying and waving my arms and they wouldn't see it. You know what I mean? And it's just an interesting thing. And then it was also just an interesting thing to reflect on, like, just like all the, like, you know, because I was an actor for a long time, right? So I had no power. Like, actors have zero power. But I really wanted to have like artistic power, you know, and I wanted to have like the ability to be like, I don't like this line, let's change it.
Right.
And I never got that, you know. But I remember just being like, that's why I was kind of talking about like I tried all these things.
Isn't it weird? That's weird that you brought that up, because actors, I think, are the biggest celebrities in the world. And yet most of their job is say what we told you to say.
Totally.
You know, like it's a bigger deal if George Clooney is at a Raptors game than Gordon Lightfoot or something.
Totally.
And that's odd. I mean,
it's
that's
odd,
the wrong generational comparison, perhaps. You know, Gordon Lightfoot isn't like a hot star right now, but it is phenomenal that we place such... just because I know we've talked about this before, but the fact that you come from an acting world and you cited that as one power dynamic is fascinating, because I think a lot of people think actors or anyone on TV or movies is the most powerful person in the world.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And like George Clooney totally has power, but...
Well, yes, he does. I suppose he does.
But it is interesting. Yeah, I like it. That's the funny thing to think of. Like, what is it about our society that decides to like elevate these people who are like actually like puppets,
pretending to be people or pretending
to be other people?
Yeah, that's very...
It's very interesting.
I think because maybe we internally are always looking for the fastest route to escapism.
Totally.
We are built to vacation. We are built to not... It's very strange. We just strive so much to not be doing the thing we're not... We're probably, you know, we applied for jobs to do or whatever. We're looking for ways out of that.
Totally.
And I think actors represent that more. That you turned your life into just pretending you're an astronaut.
Another person. Yeah.
Or like beyond that, like, you know, a supernatural being. Like you turned your life into this fantastical realm. Whereas a singer-songwriter...
is their life, is living their life.
And we can go see them. We can
go
go see them. They'll come to our town in an arena, whatever it is.
And beg us to come to the show.
Right. But like they'll come and we can see them. They tour. Whereas an actor you see on the screen, and if you saw them on the street, it'd be like an anomaly. It'd be like they would be the freak, not you.
Totally.
So it's fascinating that you probably have that dynamic within you of like, I was an actor and I had no power. I'm going to get into music. The land of riches and power. But
Absolutely.
on some level,
It's a great fallback.
at some level, you have asserted yourself more and are better known, maybe as the weather station than you were as an actor. Maybe, I don't know if that's fair.
Probably, yeah. I mean, but I think when I look at the song or when I look at the words, I'm like, really, what I'm talking about is expression more than
Yes.
I think what I'm talking about is like wanting to be able to express myself, which is interesting. But I feel like I really have been learning how to do that,
Yeah.
And so in a way, but yeah, it's like where I say like, I wanted to lay it all down so it would open to you like a flower. I wanted power. It's kind of I really liked that line. It's like a cool idea and it's true of people that have power. It's like you give them enough time to like, craft something that just like you put it down and it just opens, Yeah. And you can and you're like, oh, that's beautiful. I want to take that in. And
your impulse was I want to have power to share something with you.
Totally.
That's an interesting impulse too. That's not what people think of when they think of people who are power hungry.
Well, totally. And that's why it's like an interesting, it's not like, that's why I say like, I don't mean like political power or like, or
necessarily a selfish power.
Or a selfish power. But, I think, maybe behind the interest in power for everyone, there is this like interest in being able to express yourself. I don't know.
Or share something, or help people.
Help people.
With great power comes great responsibility. That's what Spider-Man was told.
Yeah.
So totally. Maybe there's something to that.
Maybe,
okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, we move on.
Okay.
We move on to the next song, Complicit.
I was on the sidewalk and you were in a dream. You said you couldn't stand it these days, your sensitivity. The city felt oppressive, the heat and the noise, and even at home you felt every unspoken voice. I don't know how, but I tell you you'll be fine. And I set the table and you pour the wine. Oh, always have been capable, always have been kind. It isn't really your fault, just the tenor of the times. You got a job and lost it, and they never told you why. And you can't seem to get past it, this ordinary lie. And they're saying this summer is the worst it's ever been, with the radio on, and they're talking. Another shooting floods creeping in the lowlands, and everybody's shouting. And I just told you, hey, and then I say nothing at all. I don't think my voice matters really after all. I was raised to hear the curlews, I was raised to notice light, and I watched the little swallows, delicate in their flight. I try my hand down through the water of the familiar riverside. 4 hours in such silence, I lay beside, terrified, for no one in my tire, for all the parts per million, for unstoppable desire. Oh, how can you get over it, knowing all you know, all the facts and the figures, younger years ago.
What a mess. Okay, well, let's see. I wrote this song twice. There's 2 versions of this song. This is the version that's on the record. The other version's about a totally different thing. But this version I decided to use because it really freaked me out. But I sang it like on the day when we were recording like bass and drums. Mm-hmm. And Don Kerr, who played drums, was like, you have to put this out. Like, this is really important. I was like, all right. And the guy who mixed the record said the same thing. I was like, all right. So, it just was like I was trying, when I say trying, I always mean fumbling. I was fumbling to express how I feel about like the natural world and climate change, to be honest.
Uh-huh.
And just like right now where it's just like I feel so much panic, and like everyone I know feels so much panic, and like everyone I know is like struggling with anxiety disorders, and it's hard not to connect that to you know, A, like the way that the future looks for people of our generation, which is not good. And B, like climate change, you know, which like I actually think about all the time and is this very personal thing where like I think about climate change every day and I don't say anything about it and I don't do anything about it. You know, it's just this like thing in the background of my life. And I was thinking about my relationship to nature and like how it used to make me feel so calm and now it makes me feel kind of nervous sometimes because I'm like, I feel like this is something that I'm gonna lose. You know what I mean? It's like all these things are gonna be lost, you know?
Yeah.
Some of it isn't going to be, but like we don't know what the future holds and all this like certainty is, you know?
Yeah.
So I was just trying to like let some of that out and came out in this big kerfuffle of a song.
Are there particular passages that have inspired you to describe it as a mess or a kerfuffle? Like, is there a particular passage you want to cite in terms of like, you know, just an example of where you maybe struggle but felt also like that kind of captures the confusion, that kind of captures that tension that you're talking about?
Right. I don't know. I mean, I think it's just, I was talking to someone about this the other day and I was like, well, you know, I feel like people think of climate change as like this political issue.
Yeah.
And when you write a song about a political, quote unquote, political issue, it's supposed to be like really clear. You know what I mean? Sure. It's supposed to be like, we shall overcome, or like, you know what I mean? It's supposed to be this like protest song thing. Yep. And I just was like, I don't feel like I can write a protest song about climate change because I don't feel like I have any answers. And I don't feel like I've done anything in my life that's been useful for it. You know, like I don't.
Is the complicit aspect a guilt thing?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Like I'm saying, like the thing that's so painful about it is that like we're all complicit in it, you know, with our lives. Like it's like unless you live off the grid and are self-sustaining, you're participating in this system that we all know is wrong. Yeah. And you know, and to a certain extent, what else can you do? You know, like it's like the frustration with it is like we need way more powerful people than us to step up to the plate. But I just was thinking about that guilt and like frustration and feeling like I don't feel like things are going to be okay, and I've somehow just like got used to that feeling and I don't like that. Yeah,
that's fair.
So that's why I guess I say it's a kerfuffle, or like it just feels like a kind of like a big mess of thoughts.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. I mean, I know you probably don't feel like that was a clear explanation of that kerfuffle, but I think it was.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we move on to another cheery number, Black Flies.
Super cheery.
You were at work, you felt good, and you shook your tangled hair down with the sweat in your eyes, and all the black flies under the scars. You lie down there in the grasses on the cliff top. You remember salt stinging in your lashes.
You know, this one's like pretty oblique. I was trying to just capture it. It's like a partner to complicit. It's like I was trying to capture this thing of like sometimes I go and experience nature, you know, like I go, the you in the song is really just me.
Hey, this is a callback to when we were trying to figure this out earlier.
Wait, is you or is you me? Or am I you?
So the you in this situation is actually you. Oh Lord.
Probably. I mean, it could be anyone, but it's just sort of like this thing of like you go to a place that's meaningful to you, and you know, I've had very strong emotional feelings in nature. You know, like there have been times where like I've been in an extremely beautiful place and I've found myself crying, you know, and you feel very overwhelmed, or you feel very like, you know, healed, or just like all these aspects of yourself that you've been carrying around, you feel like just don't matter. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, why do I care about all this bullshit? Like, I'm me, you know, like, but then in the end, you're like, well, it's time to go home. It's getting dark, and you get in your car, and you like, that's why the last verse is like, you know, you got into the car and you close the heavy metal door and with your hand on the plastic, and you drive on as though it didn't matter. Like, that's sort of the point of the song. It's just like, it's weird to have these very beautiful experiences and then just like put them in a box and just go back to your life.
Well, yeah, there's like a philosophical angst that runs through the record, and I know that I remember reading stuff about it when it came out, and people thought you really were delving into yourself here. Does it? I mean, I feel like you were doing that with every record. Does this feel like
Totally.
a particularly therapeutic version of it? Like, do you feel like, I think we alluded to a couple times to instances where maybe it was as far back as Free, where it felt like your perspective was actually altered by the end of writing a song and figuring out what you really felt about someone, or how you really felt about someone.
Yeah.
But is that, and I don't want to speak too generally, but we're almost towards the end of the record. Is that feeling there? Is that sensation that you went into yourself here and came out different?
With something new. Actually, yeah, I feel like that's what's been happening ever since I've written songs. Like, that's always been what's happened. Like, I remember I made All of It Was Mine, and then I was like, that record, like, it's so funny because it sounds so complete when you hear it, and you're like, oh, I really had figured out all these things, but I actually hadn't. And it wasn't until I like made the whole record and listened back, I was like, oh, this is how I feel. And yeah, I think I've always had this element where I'm kind of following like something through like a darkness, and that's what makes me want to write the song. Like going into this like space that I don't fully understand, but in the end I do find like the act of writing the song teaches me something for sure.
And I mean, I've been using the words like therapeutic and whatnot, which suggests, there's some conflict that you had to resolve. But this is Black Flies is fascinating because you're dealing with something you love, something you enjoy, the outdoors, nature, and yet there's darkness there for you.
Totally.
So within that, you're learning. It's fascinating to me.
It's a pretty murky space.
It is.
Stuff comes out of. That's why I feel like this record is like, I just can't believe I put it out and people liked it. But, because it does feel like it's like I opened like the door to my room and it's like such a mess. And a friend's like, oh, beautiful room. I'm like, what? It's like I didn't fully tidy everything before the company came over.
Well, I will say that I've been thinking about this a lot. I've been thinking about this a lot myself. I was watching a show because I've been going through the same anxiety issues that you were alluding to earlier, and I was watching a show that I've watched a billion times, and it happened to be on TV. They were marathoning this very intense show, and I couldn't do it.
Right.
Couldn't watch it. It was too intense for me. It's something I've seen before, and I think that what I realized is like, man, like if that was really weird for me because I'm like, when I really think about it, I've always been drawn to weird, dark, murky stuff.
Right.
And so what I'm saying, I bring this up because you've been hearing from people who say, what a great record,
totally.
And what they're saying is, I connected with your dark, weird world because
totally.
It's my dark, weird world.
Totally.
And so, but you're in a situation where if someone looks at an ad for your record in a magazine, it says like NPR and NME and Exclaim and whoever, like Pitchfork, everyone loves the whoever, know? So there's this like, oh, like this is what you're talking about, I think. Like this sort of overground acceptance of what you've done is weird.
Totally.
You expect the freaks to be into it, but now that it's like, oh, like everyone, I'm doing a Tiny Desk concert? What the hell's going on? Maybe, I don't know. Like that.
But that's what's so interesting though, because it's like, I mean, everybody's the freaks, like
we are more freakish generally than we thought.
Yeah. And I think that like, if you think about like the fact that like Neil Young is like a mega freak. And so is Bob Dylan. And like they're like probably like two of the most famous musicians that have ever been.
Yes.
In our modern culture. Mm-hmm. Michael Jackson was a freak. And it's just so interesting when you look at it, you're like, oh, like people appreciate that. And it's just funny how in culture we like to like wrap things up. Like it's like this cool show you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's like super murky and weird. It's like probably like a hit show. You know what I mean? Like
massive. It was Breaking Bad. I just couldn't watch Breaking Bad.
It's too stressful. I've experienced that before.
I watched it before and I never thought that.
Yeah.
But I've had a thing, and it's calming down now, I will say. But at the height of this anxious period, I was like, I can't watch Pulp Fiction. I can't watch like whatever's on TV
So that
sometimes.
you
I
can't
still
have
have
it. I
I
was
still have
surprised.
cable. I
Yeah.
don't know if that came through.
Cable?
We still have cable. We still have like the basic cable package. So it's horrible because like I want to go to sleep and I should be asleep because that'll help with my anxiety so I can watch Breaking Bad with peace of mind. Instead, I'm watching this Breaking Bad marathon and I'm freaking out and I can't do it. I had to turn it off. So yeah, anyway, you're right. We're more freakish. That's why you're getting more love.
Well, that's the validating thing about it. I'm
Yeah.
like, that's kind of cool. I let my freak flag fly more than I have in the past. It's still like a pretty normal record. Like there's guitar and vocals. Like it's not crazy. It's not experimental. But, you know, it's kind of cool when you're like, okay, I let my freak flag fly. People like it better than when I let it fly less.
It's still an unsettling record. Like I'm not
it's
trying.
pretty weird.
It is weird.
Yeah.
And that has everything to do with how you sing. That has
Yeah.
everything to do with the notes you suddenly are like, whoa. Like I am surprised by your record every time I hear it,
That's cool.
and I think that's a testament to its greatness. But also, I can see some people being like, it's too weird. I don't know what to. She's all over the place. What is she
But
singing
you know
about?
what's so crazy though? Well, I'm mostly thinking of this because I just got back from touring with Bahamas, but like it's really interesting how like I feel like I'm presenting this freakish thing, but if you're not like sensitive and you don't like listen deeply to music, it's like it all like the funny thing about my music is like I've always felt like I was presenting these like somewhat subversive
Yeah,
ideas,
yeah.
and like less so on this record, but more you know on Loyalty and stuff. Like a lot of there's a bunch of people who really listen to it and are like, oh, it's so moving. Like I felt so touched by all these things, but then there's always people who are like, it's so lovely. You're lovely. Like someone came up to me at the merch table the other day and they just touched me on the arm and they went, you're adorable.
Oh man.
And I was like, I just played a guitar solo. I'm trying not to be adorable,
Yeah.
but you still, you know, like it is funny how, but I think that's all like art. It's like, think of like the Talking Heads, like all pop art, you know, like the Talking Heads, like David Byrne's like a total freak.
Yes.
Everything he says is so freakish and wonderful. He's so great.
Right.
But he wrapped it in like a fun pop beat. And so like there were people who
Yeah.
were like burning down the house. Like they don't know what they're singing, you know, like,
Yeah.
or like the Tragically Hip.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
oh my God, like those guys, like listening back to that music, I'm like, wow, like I listened to this in high school with all the like guys who played on the hockey team and, you know, went to bush parties and stuff. And like, they're all singing along to all the words.
Yeah.
And we're all singing along. And it's like Gore just like snuck a bunch of stuff in
Yeah.
for people to sing along to. I didn't really make like that sing along music, but yeah, it's cool. I like that's something cool about music. Actually, I think that really works where, you know, you can listen to it or not listen to it, and either way it can
Yeah.
work on you.
Well, I think it's also a good outlet for you because within it there's a poetic aspect. There's
Melody.
melody and a kind of theatricality to it too. Like
Totally.
you can dress up all these ideas in this strange form that will resonate with people and get to people in its own way.
It's pretty fun.
yeah.
Yeah.
We move on.
Okay.
We move on to again. I have a hard time believing that this is true. I don't know what to say.
I don't know what to say, but stay until the meaning comes and finds you anyway. You may not be certain, you may not ever choose. You may find your heart revealed like a bruise when you didn't call me, when you did call. Water efflorescent through a brick wall. Now we're laughing again, walking late at night. The catch in your throat, the catch in mine. I don't know what to say, so I say too much. But maybe through it all you feel the warmth of my touch.
It came from, you know, the thing that happens sometimes in a relationship where you're just like talking about, you know, problems or whatever, and it just doesn't really, at a certain point, it just doesn't really seem important that you're talking, or like what you're talking about isn't going to make a difference. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's sort of like, that's why it's just like, I don't know what to say, but stay. That's what I'm saying. Like,
Right.
I don't know what to say except for saying stay, you know, because it's sort of like the crux of the song is like choosing like I say, like the mud of love like I sort of had this image that I tried to put in the song of like just like standing in a river, you know, like with like all this like stuff floating by, you know, like when you're like really, when there's like really muddy rivers that like all the mud in a river like has been carried from like this. I really failed at like expressing this metaphor, but I really like this idea of like a really muddy river is like kind of ugly, but it's beautiful because it's like all this like silt has been washed down from like a mountain somewhere.
Right.
You know, and it's carrying and it's like fertilizing the plain. So it was
you
that
caught
idea.
yourself there, which I thought was interesting. You were you're narrating some kind of nature documentary, perhaps. You're like, what am I doing?
I was thinking of Planet Earth, freshwater.
No, it's fascinating. The rivers are totally fascinating.
Rivers are amazing. They're such a great metaphor for everything. But so I was just like kind of thinking of this thing of like, you know, in a relationship where it's like there's the surface, you know, you're having a conversation and you think it's going to solve things, but like the undercurrent is like still there. The undercurrent of emotion and like how it's like sometimes you just kind of, it doesn't really matter what you say. It's like the thing that's pulling you forward is still there, you know?
Yeah,
cool.
I hear the awe in what you're saying, but there's an underlying hopelessness too, I have to say. You know, this notion of it doesn't exactly matter what we say because it's going to happen anyway, and you're still going to be here, you know? That's kind of fascinating.
Maybe I shouldn't be a couples therapist. I don't know.
No, but it's important what you say there. I don't know what to say, but stay.
Well, in my mind, it was like a nice sentiment. It's just like,
no, it is.
It's just like sometimes, you know, because sometimes you don't know what you want to say, and like, and sometimes, you know, a week later, you're like, oh, that's what I was trying to say. I didn't know at the time what I was, you know, like sometimes you say you say stuff that you think really matters to you, and then you realize like what you were really talking about was this other thing that actually matters. So it's sort of nice sometimes, you know, to think on like just the ways that you're connected no matter what, in a way.
I like that futility is on your mind. I like that, you know, with Complicit or a song like this one, you're kind of thinking about
futility.
Futility, yeah.
Interesting. I guess I am. You're right. It's a thing.
It's on your mind. You're at least aware of. Again, it goes back to that philosophical. I called it philosophical angst, but it's just existential questions you're asking about your immediate situation, not just the world.
Right. Well, I think there's like a beauty to futility in some ways. Sometimes, where it's like, you know, there are things you can change and things you can't. You know, it's like have the wisdom to accept, blah blah blah. And you know, like it is interesting. Like I think, you know, something that I've thought a lot about is perfectionism, because I'm a perfectionist, like a horrible perfectionist. And in the past, there was like a swath of time where like that stopped me from accomplishing anything, like most perfectionists. Sure. And you know, one of like, for me growing up, getting better at everything has been in some huge part not trying to fix everything, you know, not trying to like perfectionist out on my life, which I think is actually super common. And like, you know, if you go on Facebook, it feels like everyone is these crazy perfectionists trying to like perfect like a social movement or perfect you know what I mean? Like perfectionism is like really strong in our society. You know, it's like you said this, but you shouldn't have said it this way. You should have said it that way. And that's why I don't accept you anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it's like sort of like this thing of like, it's like this politician did all these things, but they didn't do this thing. And therefore, like, I'm no longer going to support them. It's sort of like this thing of like, well, I'm just an advocate for like a more, not an advocate, but I just, for me, like a big part of growing up and like learning sanity has been just learning to accept a certain amount of like mud in the scenario.
I remember talking to Shad about one of his songs in the last few years, and he said the same thing. He thought he wasn't referring necessarily to perfectionism, but he thought a whole generation was being way too hard on itself.
Oh, totally.
And maybe that does have something to do with social media. Like if you start to present yourself out in the world more, those who are really brazen about it are okay with it. They let go. I make mistakes. That wasn't as funny, or that wasn't as. But for some people, it's like I'm too afraid to participate because I don't. It has to be perfect, and
yeah, that's a big thing.
And it's actually halting people from even trying things.
Totally, yeah, and it's actually a big cultural swing that I've noticed since like sort of like the generation just like a little bit older than me was sort of like a bit like devil may care, like irony, like kind of like this like fuck it, like being a freak is good, you know, and sort of like, and my generation / younger is like kind of a bit more like we all go to therapy and try to solve all our problems and we are all like, well, my relationship is perfect except for this thing that we're really working on, you know, and it's just sort of like this, it's very different actually from that generation, but like a lot of like the music and like movies and all this stuff from that generation is still kind of like in the pop culture, but it's like very different from like the modern day, like just like everything edited and curated
that's fascinating
thing. This has so much to do with
no
that
it's
song.
A tangent. It's
Tangents are great.
This is what happens with these songs. With these song discussions, we go into bigger picture things and you never know where things tangents
Totally. Yeah.
I dare call it a tangent.
It's a tangent.
I'm very proud of that one. Let's move on to the penultimate song, In an Hour.
You know, in an hour it could all turn around. You don't have to know how, though it all feels like fate now that you're down. Strange in your body and strange in your mind. Now it's coming from outside. I lay it down on the floor and I close the blinds. You don't have to be everything that I know you need. It don't have to be only minute 1, minute 2, minute 3.
This song's just a little song, you know. It just was nice. It was like a nice little antidote to the rest of the record.
The rest of the whole record?
I really like, I got my friend Nathan Salzberg to play guitar on this song. It's really beautiful. The acoustic guitar, it's really nice. But yeah, it's sort of like it's a bit more of like a more hopeful song, I guess. It's like when someone you know is like freaking out or when you're freaking out.
Yeah.
It's this idea of like, you know, it could all turn around. You know, in an hour, it could all turn around. You don't have to know how. It's kind of the point of the song. Because it's like, I think when you're freaking out or when you're in like a panic attack or something, you're like thinking about something that you can't solve and you're like, there is no way I'm going to solve this problem, so I'm never going to feel better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's about a relationship with time too, I think. I think when you're in those panic moments, time freezes.
Totally. Yeah.
And if you can be objective about it, you're like, wait a minute, time will actually heal this.
Totally. Yeah, it's like everything can stay the same and you can feel better. You know, it's just like a wonderful quirk of like humanity's brains.
Yes.
And you know, it's not going to last forever.
Yeah.
You know, that particular state of mind is not going to last forever. Everything changes. It's going to be okay.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like my very dark way of saying everything's going to be all right. But I think more useful than saying everything's going to be all right to someone who's having a panic attack.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I related to it on that level. Is there anything more you want to say?
I haven't been singing this song live, so I almost like forget it a little bit. So I got to go back to it, I guess.
Okay. This might spur on
returning to it. Yeah. Set list, throw it in. Yeah, totally.
Okay. All right, well, we'll move on.
All right.
I could tell you kind of want to and you kind of don't, but I'm going to go with we're moving on.
We're moving on.
Okay.
We've spoken enough. Okay.
I feel like we move on to the final song on the record, The Most Dangerous Thing About You.
Yeah.
The most dangerous thing about you is your pain. I know for me it is the same. It was restless, you felt it, but never could it call by name. It was yours for life to have and to hold a companion you had never. A shadow you saw but never knew that you cast.
This is more about a specific person who you know, I just was reflecting on them and like their just absolute lack of self-awareness, you know?
Oh.
And just a person who's like caused a lot of pain, you know, in like their lives. Like they've like caused all this pain and tumult to other people who don't deserve it. But it's just so interesting to look at them and be like, oh, like, you know, through the lens of like the modern way of looking at things, it's like you have depression, or like you have,
right.
you know, like you have all this pain that you've never acknowledged. Like that's why it's like the most dangerous thing about you is your pain. Well, and then I know for me it is the same, because I can see the same thing in myself if I like let it, you know what I mean? It's like when you get into a dark frame of mind, it twists how you see everything. And then you can, you know, I was trying to see, like, I was like, I can imagine how this person could have got this way just by being in pain and not realizing it and just thinking that what they think is real, you know, that like everything sucks, you know? Like,
sure.
So, you know, and I can recognize that could be a problem with me, but it isn't, luckily, hopefully. But yeah, for me it's the same, you know, like I would say, like, it was yours for life to have and to hold a companion that you had never known, a shadow you saw but never knew that you cast. Like, it's like this person's just like seeing all this darkness and like looking out at the world and being like, everyone sucks, you know, but not realizing it's like within them that they're casting this shadow.
Yeah, totally.
And people are like veering away from it, and they're not realizing that it's like coming from them, you know, and it's really sad. And so I just wrote that song. You
wanted to express something about this specific person, but it clearly, the experience of observing them had a profound impact on you, because I heard you in describing the person say, like, I could see that happening to me,
right?
But it didn't, or it hasn't.
Yeah. And
that's an interesting way of relating. I mean, I think that's how we relate to a lot of art. Is like, what would I do in this situation?
Totally.
But you have this platform where you can. I mean, did you view it as a way of reaching out to them in some ways? I mean, quietly?
I don't know.
Or was it just a way of you trying to make sense of it?
I think it was a way of trying to make sense of it. It's just sort of like when there's a person like that that's been around and that you've like absorbed a lot of their ideas and like views on life. It takes a long time to like untangle that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're like, what is this person and what is me? You know, and sort of like, how do you like unravel that? And for me, it was just sort of like this positive experience of being like, oh, maybe this person just like was really sad.
Yeah.
And didn't know what to do with that, and didn't have the framework to express that or call it by that name, I think I say.
Yeah.
You know, and what if they could have just said like, I'm sad, you know, like maybe things could have been different. You know, it's just interesting when someone's sad and tries to find like a reason for it or something to pin it on, you know, and it's like, well, sometimes you can cause a lot of trouble by doing that.
Yeah.
So I think I was just trying to unravel that, and it was just kind of nice to like put that fine a point on it, you know,
right,
on that idea. And that those people are everywhere, you know, like we have, like, it's like kind of just a different way of looking at people who inflict pain on people, you know. It's like so often, you know, we all know it's like so often there's just stuff they haven't figured out, and yeah, it's a bummer.
I mean, I have to say this has been fascinating for me because we were kind of making those jokes about pronouns and whatnot, but I do think I knew I was going to learn a lot about you through this conversation, and I feel like I often learn little bits about you through your songs. Mm-hmm. They seem clear on
That's
some
good
level.
to know.
Well, on some level, they seem. Again, I've had the luxury of speaking with you and
right,
whatnot, but I kind of get a sense that in their own, you use the word murky, but I feel like they're fairly direct songs on other levels. That they're a way of getting to know you a little bit.
Totally.
More than maybe some other artists. So I appreciate this, and I appreciate that you have this cast of characters here that are teaching you about you.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're nominated for like a Juno Award now. Or how many? How many are you? One.
Just one.
Yeah.
They're not going to let me that far in the door.
But you got the accolades, the mainstream acceptance. You're weird. Somehow it's all working out.
Yeah, it's really great. You know, I definitely, I appreciate like stuff like that happening for this record. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
You know?
So what happens next?
Oh dear. Well, you know,
You're touring.
touring a lot. We're playing this awesome show in Guelph. I feel like I haven't talked it up enough, but I think it's gonna be great. I'm really
Playing at a
stoked.
church?
It was just this whole thing where it was just like we were trying to schedule that day, and just everything kept going crazy, and it was like we're never gonna be able to play Guelph. And then I was like, no, we found a date. It was only a month away,
Yeah.
but it's great. And because I love playing in Guelph, and I was like, I want to play in Guelph.
We love having you there.
Yeah, well, it's such a great city, and
Why do you like Guelph so much?
It's just nice. It's only an hour away.
It's got rivers,
It's got rivers,
bridges.
I don't know. I just always feel there's lots of great people who live there, and come out to the shows, and like it's often a lot of students, which is cool.
Yeah.
To like reach out to like a different community, and of all the sort of small cities close to Toronto, it's probably the nicest one
Oh,
to
that's
play
nice
in
of
a
you
lot
to
of
say.
ways.
Yeah, I like it. We don't have the
I'm
best.
sure it has its like things.
Well, we don't have the best venue selection, I will say. It's just
Neither does Toronto, though.
Neither does Toronto. Yeah.
Like, let's think of it rationally.
I've heard of that. Yeah, but at least in Toronto you have dedicated performance
Music
spaces.
venues.
Yeah, we have trouble with that. That's mostly it. I don't think the places we have are terribly or badness. Like you're playing a church, for example.
Well, no, and
Someone
that
had to
was
rent
the
a
thing.
church.
I was like,
Yeah.
that's great. If you guys want to put this on, like, I'm stoked that you want to do this. So
Yeah, which is great. It's good. I'm excited to have you there. And in terms of songwriting and next steps, like, have you had a chance to contemplate what's next?
oh my god, not like it's crazy how little time I have right now. Like, it's pretty full on this year, which is great, and that's what I wanted. I've got some time in June. I've got like a week at the end of
A week?
March.
No
I've got-
pressure.
Well, June was totally free, and then it's like we keep booking other things in June. But
Right.
yeah, I have like two kind of like conflicting ideas of like a next record. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But I was joking with someone like I feel like it's like I'm not a prolific songwriter. Like everyone I know writes so many songs, and I'm so blown away by that. And I write a lot of bits of songs, but
Yeah.
I don't finish a lot of songs. And often the thing that will catalyze me into finishing songs is like when because I can always write songs, but like there's this bummer where like when you've just created something, it's like you still are creating like in that vein, and it takes a while
Oh, yeah.
to like divorce that
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
So like I didn't start writing this record until Loyalty had been out for like 8 months or something. Like I didn't write a single song.
Well, touring can also mess up
Oh,
that next
totally.
stage of creativity too.
But it's like a nice thing where it's like the egg. It's like the seed is planted, and like you start to have like little tingles of like, oh, I could go in that. Oh, like I want to write a song about this, or like,
Yeah.
or you sit down on guitar and things come out, and you're like, oh, that's different. I haven't done this before. So
Right.
that's starting to happen, and I just hope. I think I'll have some time in the summer to make another bunch of songs and then record them. I mean, it's all pretty.
No, it's all pretty
self-explanatory.
much makes sense. I just know there's a lot going on in the world, like you said, that might be fodder for songs.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's also interesting too because every time I've sat down to write songs, like for some reason, all the songs I've written lately have been super soft and like beautiful.
Nice.
So I'm not sure where that's coming from.
Well, you just made kind of. I remember reading somewhere that the Weather Station, like the self-titled album we've been discussing, was meant to be a rock record, and it has. It definitely
Elements
has.
of it, yeah.
It definitely has that lift to it. But so the notion that you might go in the opposite direction is sort of
It's
maybe
nice
natural.
too. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's funny because like I feel like I'm just constantly reacting to whatever I did before. Like I'm gonna do something different now, you know.
I think that's
It never
normal.
really is, but yeah, everybody does that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like you gotta like, move past what you've done before in order to like. There's always like this sea change where like the stuff you kind of write and come up with seems new and different versus like seeming like a continuation of what you already did.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we're all very much looking forward to what's
Cool.
next.
Yeah,
Is
me
there
too.
one song from this record that we've been discussing, like one entire song that we can play for people? And if so, which song would you select for them to hear right now?
Oh no. I mean, I've heard them all a lot of times, so I think you should select.
Oh,
the
come on.
song.
Don't do this to me. I don't know what to do. I'm just curious. I could pick something, but I actually think that this is an important part of the end
The
of my
interview.
show. Well, I kind of feel like it's insightful. If you pick the song,
Right.
it just sort of, it says something about that song in its own way.
Well, why don't we listen to the most interesting about you because we just were talking about it.
Okay.
And yeah, we could go out on that song. The great thing I like about this song, I remember I sent it to my label and they're like, is there supposed to be like another part at the end? Like it's really strange. Like, it's like, did you just like cut off? Like, was that a mistake? I was like, no, it's not a mistake, because there's something so cool. I remember I like wrote it this way, and then I was like, I like put it on in my headphones and I was listening to the mix, and I like listened to it for the first time, like where the strings just like build to that. They go through all these like crazy dissonance. Yeah. And then they go to this chord and then it just stops and it's not resolved. And it's so like painful. I'm like, I love it. Like, I'm so proud of that moment.
You met some resistance for it.
Well, it was only funny because they were just like, wait, is there supposed to be like another chord?
Glitch.
Or like, is that like a glitch? I'm like, no, it's perfect. Like, just like so Machiavellian. But yeah, I just like that ending of the record.
And okay. It is a curious way to end the record. I will agree with someone in that scenario that you just described. But it's great. This is The Most Dangerous Thing About You from the Weather Station, from the record The Weather Station. Tamara, thank you so much for this time, and best luck with everything.
Yeah, thank you. No problem.
Got a table at the old Boulevard Club. The waitress offered a smile to your joke and politeness. You did not know you held her talking while I waited, watching. Laid your credit card on the table and told me about your bills and the sale of hydro, the incompetence of your bosses and your lawyers, and the warm ocean. I woke up in your life, I was passing behind your eyes before I knew what was yours and what was mine. I listened, I took it all in stride, your ideas and distorted pride, while learning by heart all your thoughts and your vision. The most dangerous thing about you is your pain. I know for me it is the same. It was restless, you felt it, but never could it call by name. It was yours for life to have and to hold a companion you had never. A shadow you saw but never knew that you cast. And all of the sadness you can't explain poured from you like a summer rain, hand in hand with your child in the morning.
Thanks again to Tamara Lindemann of The Weather Station for returning to this show, which was in fact the 384th episode of Creative Control, which is part of the Entertainment One podcast network and is available on all iOS and Android platforms and also on audioboom.com. If you can't find an episode that you're looking for, or if you want to learn more about me or sign up for my regularly scheduled newsletter, please visit my website, vishkhanna.com, VISHKHANNA.com. You can like Creative Control with Vish Khanna on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at Vish Creative or Vish Khanna. That's me. Listen to a radio show version of Creative Control on Wednesdays at noon Eastern Standard Time around the world at CFRU.ca or on an actual radio at 93.3 FM if you're in or near Guelph. Please visit patreon.com/Creative Control to make a flexible monthly donation to keep this podcast going. It means a lot that you do that. So thank you to anyone who's doing that now and for continuing to do that. We could always use more pledges to keep the show going. So thank you for doing that and considering the option of doing that. The notion of doing that. That's what I meant to say there. Thanks again to Pizza Trocadero, The Bookshelf, and Planet Bean Coffee in Guelph, Ontario, Grandad's Donuts in Hamilton, Ontario, and Planet of Sound in Ottawa and Toronto for sponsoring this show. I'd like to thank you two for listening to it. Not you two, like Bono, Larry, Edge, and Adam. I meant you there. I would like to thank you. And, if Bono, Adam, Edge, and Larry are listening to this show, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I just want to thank everyone who listens to this show and reviews and rates the show on whatever platform they're using, and also downloads episodes. That's a big thing with the advertising. That helps. If you can download episodes, that's great. So all those things are great, and if you can continue to spread the word about the show, that would be awesome as well. That's all I have to say. I will talk to you soon. Bye for now.